Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the strategies and insights that drive innovative, disruptive businesses. Join us as we explore the mindsets, cultures, and solutions powering the next generation of industry leaders and creative trailblazers. Whether you're seeking to inject new life into your organization or spark transformative growth, the Visionary Chronicles is your guide to executable, cutting-edge business strategy. Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles. Thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate it as always. Today, we're going to talk about another subject that is on the minds of a lot of people towards year end, which we're in, the holiday season. Everybody starts thinking about long range, balancing long and short-term goals, how to define these goals, how to execute these goals. So I thought it would be great timing. Visionary goals balancing short and long-term goals. And really trying to get a perspective around what is the proper planning process, what works, what doesn't work. So when we look at the Visionary Chronicles, we always want to make sure that we instill into companies and leaders of brands, visionary or not, how do these great visionary brands define and balance short and long-term goals? And a quote that I like from Peter Drucker, who's one of my favorites, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Not a lot of people think that way. They either stick with the status quo, go what's comfortable, not what's safe, and find themselves in a real predicament as they move forward in defining their goals. And at the end of the year or the end of the decade, they may look back and go, hey, we really didn't execute anything we intended to do during that period. So it's really important that when you're defining short and long-term goals, you understand how to balance this. It's really critical because what we found with Liquid Mind when we do our whiteboard sessions with leaders, both mid, large cap, public companies, and entrepreneurs, you'll kind of see the same trend is many times leaders will sacrifice one for the other. Either they're too focused on short-term goals and not define long-term strategies. So today we're tackling this topic. You know, it's essential to both every business leader and entrepreneur. And it's really important how to balance short and long-term goals. And visionary leaders often balance immediate demands with ambitions for the future, and knowing how to maintain this balance can make or break your company or brand, whatever it may be. And many times what we find in talking to leaders when we ask the question, how do you allocate your time in regards to goals? You know, how frequently do you check your goals? How do you define a short versus a long-term goal? How do you know you're executing against your plan? What are the steps along that path to executing your vision? And many times we get different answers from every brand that we work with. Very few are visionary, and very few can find that balance. And why we feel it's important with the Visionary Chronicles to go through this, because we know how important it is. The feedback that we get from our entrepreneurs and from our leaders. By the way, again, thank you for supporting the Visionary Chronicles podcast. We couldn't be happier. Being in the top 50 marketing podcasts, business marketing podcasts for FeedSpot, and again, in the top visionary podcasts on a global scale through FeedSpot. So again, thank you for their supporting the Visionary Chronicles and continue to support the Visionary Chronicles. But most important for me in particular is the feedback that we get from entrepreneurs and from leaders and how they've applied what we talk about at the Visionary Chronicles. And if you have any questions, we do have planning sessions, free planning sessions that you can reach out to us at liquidmindsite, liquidmindsite.com, or reach out to me directly at Brian, Bryan, at liquidmindsite.com. Happy to talk. We have free, what we call sessions, and we do have a new strategy that we put in place just a few weeks ago, and it's been extremely successful. We have slots for what we call sessions, one-to-one strategies that we work with on business leaders. So we're proud to announce that as well. So when we talk about balancing short and long-term goals. What I also like to do is looking at what the common leader does, because many times we get that question, well, what do most brands do? And there are a few common ways that leaders try, and I say try to balance short-term and long-term goals, which, well, not always the most effective approach. And some of these are excessive focus on short-term results. So leaders many times prioritize quick wins and immediate returns to appease investors. And this times is our mid to large cap firm shareholders to meet quarterly targets. And we've all seen that. And what you want is that you neglect the long term for the short term in order to get immediate satisfaction, but you're effectively not setting a strategy for your long-term goals. So what you want to do is this can lead to neglecting long-term strategy, underinvesting in your future, and the growth of the brand as a whole, and making decisions that sacrifice the long-term sustainability of your brand. And I talk about sustainability because this is what investors look for. The last podcast that I just released, I talked about how to get investment into your company or brand or your idea, and sustainability is a very important aspect to that. Is that you can have growth, but if it's a one-hit wonder, it's not sustainable. The second one that they focus on is a separation of short and long-term goals. So leaders create this distinct short and long-term goal sets without properly integrating them together. One should flow to the next. They should be interlaced and intertwined with one another, and understand what the difference is between a short-term and long-term goal. So this results in a disconnected, what we call siloed approach to goal setting, and conflicting priorities where short-term actions are not aligned with long-term vision. This also leads to resource allocation challenges relative to your goals and your strategy, and conflicting priorities. So that's the second one. The third one is they have an over-reliance on long-term planning. I get it. The planning is part of the process. But don't become obsessive over it. Over-reliance on long-term planning. Some leaders overemphasize, and we've seen it with our whiteboarding with leaders inside of brands, long-term strategic planning without enough agility, what we call agility and responsiveness to short-term market dynamics. In the world that we live in today, you cannot be not agile and also responsive. You can't just sit there and get run over by your competition. You need to be agile. You need to be flexible. You need to be dynamic with your short-term planning, but you can't be over-reliant on long-term planning. This leads to an organization that's inflexible and unable to capitalize on merging opportunities or address pressing challenges. And this mainly is related to our large cap firms. You know, they say it's this big tanker, they can't move quickly. And we often challenge the leaders of these large brands. Yes, you can if you properly plan for these strategic opportunities that come along, and they're predominantly in the short-term planning phase, because you need to implement quickly and execute relentlessly. So it may also demotivate employees if they don't see tangible progress or short-term wins. So long-term planning can relate to the opposite of short-term planning in getting dynamic wins. So there's an over-reliance on long-term planning. And the last one is that it's an unrealistic expectations and timelines. This leads to frustration inside of companies and brands and with investors. So leaders may be overly ambitious on long-term goals without providing sufficient resources, time, and support to achieve them. So it really leads to team frustration, brand frustration, investor frustration. It's just not a good thing to be unrealistic. Be honest with your team, your investors, the brand as a whole. Let them know what's going on. Certainly reward wins, celebrate wins, but also at the same time, be honest when things are challenging. If you're not, this can lead to frustration, burnout, sense of failure, even if the long-term vision is sound. That's the crazy part of it. So these are some areas, again, that aren't always the best planning process, but many leaders rely on this. This is what we see with Liquid Mind. is, again, excessive focus on short-term results, separation of short, long-term goals, over-reliance on long-term planning, and unrealistic expectations and timelines. These are all things that leaders lean on over and over again. Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It's insanity. So now let's dive into how you can achieve both without compromising. So let's focus on 3 critical principles without overwhelming you to keep your brand on track to achieving your vision. Many people ask us with Liquid Mind when we're doing our planning process, well, how do I balance this? We have so many things on the day-to-day that go on. So what we find is not an over-reliance on long-term planning and strategy, but more so resources allocated to short-term firefighting. And this really kind of goes back, if you haven't read his book, Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Effective Leadership. And he goes through these quadrants of where your time should be put in the priorities versus where it actually is. So first, we really need to define what short-term versus long-term goals are. And it's a fundamental principle, but I like to go back to the beginning so we can really define what these are. So before we get into balancing these goals, clarifying what is meant by short-term versus long-term planning, I felt it's really helpful to leaders. So short-term goals usually focus on the immediate future. So think in terms of quarters, weekly, sprints, whatever it may be. These objectives drive the day-to-day or the month-to-month progress. It's like hitting a monthly revenue target, launching a marketing campaign, for instance. So short-term goals are often more tactical in supporting your brand's immediate growth and adaptability. In reverse of that is long-term goals. On the other hand, they look further down the road. They focus on building your vision, achieving sustainable growth, and often the planning is done over years. So these are very big picture goals, like becoming an industry leader, establishing new product categories, or reaching significant milestones in your brand equity growth or customer loyalty percentages. So these are all very, very important goals, but many times get lost and sacrificed by the over-reliance on short-term goals. So I always ask the question too, why does this matter? It's because each set of goals requires different strategies, resources, and mindsets. People will ask me, well, what is the difference and how do we ensure that we're following the proper path and strategy to achieving our short and long-term goals? So visionary leaders know that achieving their brand's potential requires a careful balance between the two. So when I've got a book coming out next year, it's going to follow the Visionary brand, which was a bestseller, Amazon bestseller, won the Reader's Favorite Award for Best Business Marketing Genre book. So very blessed with that. And we're going to come out with a new book called The Visionary Leader. And these visionary leaders know that achieving their brand's potential requires this careful balance and ensuring that that balance is carried forward. And too much focus on the short term, and you lose sight of where you're headed. Too much focus on the long term, and you risk stalling your progress in the present. So it's a fine balance between the two. So let's go through some of these principles, the principles of what visionary leaders utilize in balancing their short and long-term goals. So principle number 1 is prioritizing and aligning your goals. And when you're aligning goals, it means that every short-term initiative is a stepping stone towards your long-term vision, if that makes sense to you. So there has to be this transition between short and long-term. There can't be this overlap. Otherwise, you're just caught in this perpetual motion of really not achieving anything or finishing anything. You start, but you never finish. So start by mapping out your big picture objectives. And then what you want to do is work backward in identifying how you're going to allocate the tools, resources, and also measurable and tangible achievement of those goals. So identify what needs to happen this year, this quarter, or this month to bring you closer to that ultimate vision you have for your brand. So consider this like building a roadmap. By breaking down the long-term vision into smaller, actionable steps, you give purpose and meaning to short-term goals, and it creates excitement with your team and a passion around what you're achieving. So this approach also lets your team know why each task matters and how it's helping to build something more significant in achieving their vision. So prioritization is key, and that's the big problem that we see with leaders is they can't, and we could almost break this down to why does this happen? It's not properly prioritizing the key tasks in order to achieve that vision. Only some immediate opportunities will serve your long-term strategy and vice versa. So it's balancing and prioritizing those. So I'll say as a leader, you must evaluate which short-term actions directly support your long-term vision. So you want to make sure that you're defining that and understanding how to achieve that. So you want to make sure, again, on prioritizing and aligning goals. Again, as a leader, you must evaluate these short-term actions that directly support your long-term goals and prioritize those accordingly. It's about saying yes to what drives the vision forward and no to that doesn't. Number 2 is being flexible and adaptable. This is where a lot of visionaries struggle because they've got this mindset of the path that they carve is the path that they follow. They don't want to carve another path and eventually get back to where they should be. So our second principle is staying flexible and ready to adapt at any time. So this is a crucial quality for balancing goals. Because as we know, things happen and market conditions and customers' needs are constantly evolving and constantly changing. So think of flexibility as a safety net that allows you to pivot your short-term strategies without losing sight of your long-term destination. Now, there's a lot in that sentence, so I'll say it again. Think of flexibility as a safety net that allows you to pivot your short-term strategies without losing sight of your long-term destination. That's pretty definitive. Easy to say, not hard. It's hard to follow. So this doesn't mean abandoning your long-term goals. It just means adjusting your course to keep moving forward, even if the path looks different than you expected. And a great example is that if your brand encounters an unexpected market trend or something you didn't see, ask yourself how to leverage it to advance immediate gains and future objectives. Again, this is where the flexibility comes in. Flexibility helps you maintain momentum without sacrificing your focus. So adaptability means being open to adjusting your long-term goals if new insights or opportunities make it necessary to do so. You have to be flexible and adaptable, but also as a brand, authentic in whatever you do. So remember, even visionary brands like Apple and Amazon, they've made significant pivots along the way. But they did so their core mission in mind, always aligning with their short-term actions with a bigger picture. So embracing adaptability keeps your brand resilient and responsive while preserving your overall vision of your future. Number 3 is creating a culture of ongoing support. So this is our third principle, which your team is vital to achieving both in short and long-term goals as a leader. It's your role to instill a culture that values both. It's vital that you have your team understand the short and long-term goals and how you're going to achieve them. Unreasonable expectations leads to frustration. Foster a work environment where both immediate wins and the future vision are celebrated at all times. Your team should know that when you're doing that, what they're doing today is not just about hitting numbers, but building something that's going to last. Encourage open communication, transparency. When your team understands the long-term vision, they're more likely to bring forward ideas and innovations that serve both immediate and future needs of your company and your brand. So cultivate a mindset where achieving short-term goals is exciting, but also framed within your mission's broader context. That's key. You want to have a leader, a visionary leader that does take feedback, that is balanced, but the priority is that he or she sticks with the long-term vision of the company and the brand. It doesn't change that. So by building a culture of vision and purpose, you instill and inspire your team to work with passion and align with their daily efforts that are meaningful and have a long-term objective in mind. So this is what creates a lasting impact and sustainable growth for your brand and your company. So to summarize the Visionary Chronicle today, so to sum up, balancing short and long-term goals is about intentionality, adaptability, and culture. So the three key principles we talked about today, and there are many, but really these are the ones that I hear day in and day out. The brands that I've been with, the iconic brands that I've been with, and the visionary leaders that I've seen worked for, and companies that I've been around, these are the three that allow you to balance long-term and short-term goals. Number one is prioritizing and aligning your goals, ensuring that your short-term steps pave the way towards your long-term vision. Number two is staying flexible and ready to adapt to anything in the marketplace. So be willing to, let's say, adjust your course when necessary without losing sight of your core mission and strategy. That's what we talked about with Apple and Amazon. They've done that, but look where they're at today. They never lost sight of what their vision was. And number three is building a culture that supports balance. So create an environment where your team sees the mission of immediate progress and the broader long-term vision of where you're taking the company and the brand, and have them feel they're part of that growth and sustainability and reward wins along the way. So when you get this balance right, you build a brand that's agile, resilient, and firmly anchored in its vision. This dual focus on today and tomorrow allows visionary brands to endure, grow, and thrive in a constantly changing world. Wouldn't you love to have that? I've talked to so many companies, brands, leaders, and visionaries alike. What is one of their main concerns? It's change. So this dual focus on today and tomorrow, you can't just focus on one. Again, allows visionary brands to endure, grow, and thrive in a constantly changing world. So I hope today's episode gives you a little bit more of a straightforward path or strategy to balancing the present demands with the future aspirations. Remember, visionary goals are about persistence and purpose. And hopefully, if you found this episode helpful, please share this with others and stay tuned for more insights to guiding your journey along the way. So until next time, keep your vision clear and progress steady. Stay true, stay authentic, be different, and be great, and enjoy the journey along the way. Thank you for your time with the Visionary Chronicles. Always appreciated. And we look forward to the next Visionary Chronicles. Thank you for listening to the Visionary Chronicles today. Really appreciate your time. Realize that you're extremely busy. And thank you to those also that have made us the #1 visionary and top 50 marketing global podcasts as ranked by FeedSpot. Also, thank you to those that have also purchased the Visionary brand, the success formula behind the world's most visionary brands, making us a Amazon bestseller, as well as winning the Reader's Favorite Award for Best Nonfiction Marketing Genre Book, still available through all distribution channels. And also, if you like what you hear with the Visionary Chronicles podcast, please subscribe or forward this to someone you know that may enjoy what we're talking about with the Visionary Chronicles. And you'll also get a free ebook edition. And it's available through all subscriptions: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, iHeart, Google Podcasts, all available for subscription no matter what you listen to. And also with the release of the Visionary brand, we're also just finished our master course located at thevisionaryfiles.com. It's a 18 video learning courses, almost 2 hours of visionary lessons on what we're talking about with the Visionary brand today. So if you could pass this along as well, again, it's available at thevisionaryfiles.com. Just finished that this quarter. We have over 2,100 entrepreneurs and brand leaders who have already taken the course. And also, if you have any questions on the podcast, feel free to reach out to me at Liquid Mind, where we have free meetings that we provide. We also partner with startups, mid to large cap consumer brands, empowering these businesses to think differently, be different. We drive a passionate culture and to tell them to execute relentlessly. I'm available at liquidmindsite.com. Also, Brian at liquidmindsite.com, and also Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me. Always love to hear your comments and feedback.